Hey guys, tonight we slip into the smoke-stained rafters of a medieval village, where the air clings heavy with wood ash and the faint sweetness of yesterday's porridge still crusted onto a pot. You rub your eyes awake, and before you've even stretched, the most urgent question of the day already burns in your chest. How on earth are you going to get that fire started? No fire, no food, and no food. Well, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe button. Only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you've got a second, I'd love it if you dropped your location and the local time down in the comments, because let's face it, there's something oddly satisfying about knowing someone out there is listening to this in the dead of night, while another is cooking lunch. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You swing your legs from the straw-stuffed mattress, scratch at a flea bite, congratulations. You've got roommates and shuffle toward the hearth. In a medieval village, the fire is your alarm clock, your stove, and your central heating system rolled into one. The family hearth is rarely allowed to die, because restarting it can mean shivering, frustration, and a whole lot of smoke in your eyes. Still, sometimes it does go out, and that's when you're down on your knees, blowing life into dry tinder, hoping sparks catch before your face turns blue. Historians still argue whether most peasants kept embers smoldering overnight, or simply relied on flint and steel each morning. What's certain is that early hours were consumed by the ritual of coaxing flame from stubborn materials. A mainstream fact here. Fire was literally survival used, not just for cooking, but for sterilizing water, warding off pests, and keeping bread dough warm enough to rise. The smoky interior makes your eyes water, and every cough feels like you've swallowed soot. Chimneys aren't a common luxury, yet most homes have a simple hole in the roof, and the entire family inhales smoke as part of breakfast. You may not realize it, but that medieval cough you just developed, perfectly normal. People basically marinated in wood smoke their whole lives. A quirky tidbit: some villagers swore by hanging herbs in the rafters so that, as smoke curled through them, it flavored the air and chased away bad spirits. You can call it primitive aromatherapy if you want. With the fire finally crackling, you dump a bit of water into a battered iron pot. No fancy coffee press, no electric kettle humming, just lukewarm water if you're lucky. Breakfast isn't a feast. It's more like survival mush. A thick porridge of oats, rye, or barley, maybe sweetened with honey if fortune smiles. But don't imagine golden syrup drizzling in slow-motion. Honey was precious, guarded by bees and beekeepers alike. Most mornings, you're staring down a grayish sludge that fills the belly without exciting the taste buds. And yet, there's something comforting about that pot of pottage simmering at dawn. It means you've got enough grain left over, at least for now. Grain is the backbone of the medieval diet. 70% of calories came from it. Bread may steal the spotlight later in the day, but right now, it's porridge first. You chew slowly, and it sticks to your ribs. A medieval version of your overnight oats, minus the Instagram aesthetic. Step outside, and you'll hear the muffled coughs and clatter of other homes stirring to life. Each cottage has its own thin ribbon of smoke, rising skyward. A signal that yes, life continues. Dogs bark. A rooster crows at an hour so offensive you'd swear it's trolling you. And someone's baby is already screaming. Welcome to the soundscape of your medieval morning. Here's the reality check. Your breakfast routine doesn't involve scrolling news feeds. It involves trudging outside, splitting logs, hauling water, and praying that last year's harvest holds out until the next. Historians still argue whether villagers had much variety in daily meals, or if monotony was the rule. Some accounts suggest occasional eggs, fresh fruit, or cheese brightened mornings. But others claim the working poor rarely tasted anything beyond porridge and coarse bread. You stretch your arms and feel the ache in muscles that never quite rest. People here rise with the sun and collapse when darkness falls, their lives bent to rhythms of nature. Breakfast is not a leisurely affair, it's fuel for survival. Yet, even in this drudgery, you notice small comforts. The warmth of fire on your face, the sweet hiss of wood sap in the flames, the steady bubbling of oats. A joke sneaks in here, because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. Imagine trying to sell this medieval breakfast on a modern food blog. Rustic heritage gruel infused with notes of ash and faint barnyard ambience. $10 a bowl, artisan pottery included. By the time you've scraped the last sticky clumps from your wooden spoon, the village is fully awake. You hear carts creaking down the lane, hooves clopping in mud, and gossip already buzzing like flies on a summer carcass. People trade news, argue about land strips, mutter about taxes. And through it all, food is never far from mind what's left in the larder, what can be stretched, what must be gathered. Inside the cottage, the fire is still the star. It will burn all day, demanding your attention like the neediest toddler you've ever met. You'll keep feeding it sticks, chips, and larger logs, balancing heat so dinner doesn't scorch. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you worry about sparks catching on thatched roofs because one stray ember could turn a village into ash in minutes. You glance up and see soot-blackened beams, rafters lined with hanging herbs, onions, maybe a strip of salted pork if you're lucky. The kitchen, if you can call it that, is more storage shed than gourmet lab. There's no countertop, no sink, no spice rack alphabetized by your neat freak roommate. It's a smoky chamber where every tool is simple but indispensable. Here is a quirky little detail you might enjoy. Some households kept a special fire dog, not the iron tool, but an actual dog. The little creature would curl near the hearth, soaking warmth and occasionally serving as a furry heat pack for chilly feet. Medieval life wasn't glamorous, but you had companionship if your dog smelled worse than the smoke. And still, in this morning haze, you sense both the fragility and the resilience of daily life. One pot of porridge, one fire coaxed alive, one more day survived. That's how food begins in your medieval village, not with banquets, not with recipes from a glossy book, but with the simple, stubborn act of lighting fire and boiling grain. The rest of the day will stretch far beyond this fields, mills, ovens, feasts, famine, but for now, you're warmed, filled, and ready to follow the rhythm of survival that's been humming since before you were born. You step outside, and the air is sharp with dew, heavy with the damp scent of tilled earth. Your breath fogs faintly as you wander the dirt track, trailing behind villagers who already march toward fields and gardens. The day hasn't warmed yet, but their hands are busy. Woven baskets swinging from their arms, tools clattering against hips. If you thought grabbing cereal from the cupboard was work, brace yourself here. Every crumb of food starts with sweat in the soil. The fields stretch in narrow strips, not neat squares like modern farms. That's because of the open field system. Land is divided among families, each patch scattered so no one hogs the best soil. You tramp through mud, and your shoes, if you've even got leather ones, soak through instantly. That earthy chill climbs your legs, and suddenly the idea of socks feels like the greatest invention of all time. Today's mission is simple. Gather what you can. Grain is the backbone, but it's not harvest season yet. What you'll collect instead are greens from the garden, herbs sprouting between rows, maybe turnips or cabbages that survived last night's goat raid. And yes, there's always a goat raid. You hear one bleating angrily in the distance, which is probably medieval for "come chase me." Historians still argue whether most peasants had enough vegetables year-round or if malnutrition was more common than not. Some records hint at garden plots crammed with beans, peas, onions, and leeks. Others insist that by winter, a villager's diet was basically dried bread with the occasional onion for excitement. One mainstream fact holds steady. Beans and peas were a lifeline. They gave protein where meat rarely did, and they grew reliably in European soil. You squat down beside a woman yanking stubborn carrots from earth, her hands rough, nails rimmed in soil that no amount of scrubbing will remove. She drops a few into your basket, nodding without a word, as if to say, "Don't waste time, keep pulling." And you do. Your knees ache instantly. Gardening without ergonomic knee pads. Let's just say medieval bodies didn't need gym memberships, they lived CrossFit daily. A quirky tidbit to amuse you. Some villagers believed that planting beans during certain moon phases made them grow bigger. It wasn't science, but hey, it was agricultural astrology. Imagine horoscopes, like today your peas will flourish. Avoid planting cucumbers if Mercury is sulking. As you gather, the air is filled with chatter. Gossip about the Lord's steward making rounds, worries about the weather, whispers about the church's next feast day, and woven between, practical exchanges. Who's cow-calved? Who has extra onions? Who's willing to trade a handful of eggs for dried herbs? The market isn't always stalls and coin. Half the economy runs on barter and neighborly negotiation. Speaking of herbs, you stop at the edge of a cottage garden. Thyme, sage, parsley, dill, tiny explosions of green against brown earth. They flavor food, but more importantly, they double as medicine. Stomachache, chew fennel, toothache. Try sage leaves, headache. Well, tough luck, you're just going to lie down and hope the headache gets bored of you. The sensory overload is constant. The earth under fingernails, the damp smell of roots, the faint sweetness of crushed herbs when your basket presses them. You itch, you sneeze, and you're already hungry again. Gathering food makes you hungrier for the food you don't yet have. By midday, the sun has risen high enough to sting your eyes. Sweat beads along your neck. Insects buzz without mercy. And you've got a basket heavy with turnips, a bundle of leeks, and one very unimpressive cabbage that looks like it's reconsidering its will to live. Still, every morsel counts. Here is a moment for gentle sarcasm. You dream of tomatoes or potatoes to spice things up, but bad news. Both are New World crops, centuries away from hitting Europe. Your medieval salad is looking like cabbage, onions, and beans. Instagram influencers would have a meltdown. Back at the village, you pass the grain fields. Though not yet ripe, they stand like armies of green spears. Wheat, rye, oats, barley, each destined for bread, ale, or porridge. Grain is gold here, and lords protect it with zeal. Peasants work endlessly to ensure it thrives, yet much of it will be tithed away to monasteries or the manor. You'll keep some, sure, but never as much as you sweated for. A mainstream fact again. Bread was so vital that shortages could spark riots. Chroniclers describe towns erupting into chaos when loaves became scarce. Imagine risking your neck for a hunk of stale brown bread. That's how critical grain was. Still, villagers find ways to supplement. Wild berries dot hedgerows in summer. Mushrooms tempt gatherers in damp forests, though picking the wrong kind could mean your last supper. Historians still argue whether peasants were skilled mushroom hunters or avoided them out of fear. What's certain is that hunger often forced risky choices. One joke creeps in as you pick berries. You imagine explaining to a medieval farmer that one day people would pay $8 for a pumpkin spice lattes. Spices, milk, sugar, and grain all thrown casually together. They'd probably laugh themselves into a coughing fit, then charge you triple rent for such luxury. By evening, your basket overflows with humble treasures. You stumble back, legs sore, shoulders aching, but there's a satisfaction in it. You earned this food with your own hands. Every onion, every bean pod is the result of bending to the earth, pulling, sweating, and carrying. Back at the cottage, you dump the produce onto a wooden table scarred with knife marks. The fire is still burning from the morning struggle, ready to receive your offerings. The rhythm continues: gather, prepare, cook, eat, survive. One last quirky tidbit before night falls. Some medieval villagers swore that cabbages could cure headaches if tied around your head. Fashion statement? Maybe. Effective? Probably not. But in a world without Tylenol, a cabbage hat might have seemed worth a shot. So you sit down, wiping soil from your hands, stomach already rumbling. Today's haul may not be glamorous, but it means tomorrow's meals will exist. And in the medieval village, that's all that matters, continuing one more day, one more bite, one more fire tended. You wake the next morning, still tasting yesterday's porridge, clinging stubbornly to your teeth. The fire sputters in the hearth, and before you even stretch, someone is already calling you to the next chore: grinding grain. Because, like it or not, your stomach depends on flour, and flour doesn't appear in neat bags from a supermarket shelf. Here, it's you, your aching arms, and a stone tool that makes you question every decision leading up to this moment. The cornstone sits in the corner, solid and gray, waiting with all the menace of an unpaid bill. Two rough discs stacked together, the upper one fitted with a wooden handle. Your job: dump grain into the center hole, grab the handle, and start turning. The sound is relentless, a gritty scrape like nails on sandpaper. The vibration travels up your arms until your shoulders burn. Modern gym-goers do arm day. Medieval peasants did corn day every day. Historians still argue whether peasants preferred hand corns or relied more heavily on communal mills. What's clear is this: before the arrival of more advanced wind and water mills, most villagers endured hours of daily grinding. A mainstream fact. One family could easily spend several hours a day just producing enough flour for bread and pottage. Imagine dedicating half your waking life to an activity as repetitive as turning a crank. The flour that emerges isn't fluffy white powder. Forget cake flour, bread flour, or gluten-free alternatives. This stuff is gritty, flecked with bran, and carries the earthy tang of whatever dust happened to fall in during grinding. It will fill your belly, but also slowly wear down your teeth like sandpaper. Archaeologists examining medieval skeletons often find enamel worn to nubs, courtesy of all that grit in daily bread. A quirky tidbit sneaks in here. In some places, villagers actually believed mice who nibbled on flour were blessed because they'd already tasted the bread before the humans. Of course, most people still try to chase them off unwanted mouse droppings as an extra seasoning. But hey, when superstition meets survival, logic takes a coffee break. You keep grinding. The corn squeaks, sweat slides down your temple. Someone makes a joke about you turning into a windmill if you spin long enough, and honestly, they might be right. By the time you've filled even a small sack, your arms feel like jelly. Modern folks brag about their step counts. Here, you brag about not collapsing face first into flour dust. Now and then, you glance longingly toward the village watermill. If your lord is generous or greedy, have access to it. Mills are miracles of engineering. A stream diverted into a wheel, power harnessed to spin massive stones far more efficiently than your puny arms ever could. You imagine grain flowing in, flour pouring out, and you sigh. But here's the catch: milling comes with a fee. Usually, a percentage of the flour itself goes to the miller and the lord. So while your muscles scream at the quern, your mind wrestles with a question: would you rather lose your strength or your food? Historians still debate just how oppressive these milling monopolies were. Some argue that lords used mills as yet another way to squeeze peasants dry. Others point out that mills genuinely eased daily burdens, even if you lost part of your grain. Either way, the choice rarely felt fair when your family's stomachs were at stake. By midday, you've ground enough flour to feel proud, or at least alive. You brush dust from your tunic, coughing as the fine powder clings to your lungs. Your face looks like you tried out medieval clown makeup, white streaks across your cheeks, hair caked in flour. And yet, you feel oddly accomplished. This isn't just food, it's survival currency. Dough, waiting to happen. One light joke drifts into your thoughts. Imagine bringing a medieval sack of flour to a modern artisan bakery. The baker, with tattoos and a waxed mustache, sniffs it and says, "Ah yes, hints of oat bran, undertones of soil, a whisper of mouse droppings." Perfect for our $12 sourdough. You'd probably just roll your eyes and take your loaf home. But back in the village, your flour has no luxury attached. It will be stretched thin, mixed with barley or rye, maybe bulked out with peas or acorns in lean times. Yes, acorns. Desperation makes for creative baking, though the result tastes closer to tree bark than to comfort food. And still, it fills the belly. The process leaves your arms trembling, and as you wipe sweat away, you notice kids playing nearby, their laughter mixing with the corn's scrape. They might be the ones grinding in a few years, once their shoulders grow strong enough. Childhood here is short no long afternoons scrolling through TikTok. Instead, children fetch water, chase goats, scare crows from fields, and learn early that food doesn't appear by magic. As evening approaches, you tie off your flour sack with a cord, proud despite the ache. Every grain represents time stolen from leisure. But then again, medieval peasants didn't have leisure the way you imagine it. Their relaxation was talking while grinding, laughing while hauling, gossiping while baking. Work and life blurred so tightly that one was never separate from the other. A quirky superstition closes the day's chore. Some villagers believed grinding grain while humming a hymn kept the devil out of the flour. So you find yourself mumbling a tune, partly for rhythm, partly for protection, and partly to keep yourself awake. Whether it works, who knows? But hey, humming beats silence when your arms are about to fall off. So you stagger back home, sack of flour slung over your shoulder, body aching, lungs full of dust. Tomorrow, that flour will rise in ovens, simmer in pots, maybe form dumplings and broth. But for tonight, you know the truth. Before bread ever fills your mouth, it drains your muscles. And in this medieval village, your strength is always the first ingredient. The sack of flour slumps against your hip as you shuffle toward the heart of the village. Your arms still hum with yesterday's ache, but there's no time for sympathitata. That flour must be transformed into bread. And bread is not just food. It's currency, ritual, and survival rolled into a crusty loaf. You're not alone. All along the lane, villagers drift with baskets, sacks, and wrapped bundles, converging like ants toward a single point: the communal oven. Yes, an entire village often shared one. Fuel was expensive, ovens were costly to build, and who wants every hut smoking like a chimney stack? So instead, once or twice a week, fires roared in a massive stone oven, and everyone queued up, dough in hand, tempers in tow. The oven squats like a stone beast at the village edge, its mouth blackened from decades of fire. Today, it glows faintly, warm but not yet blazing. You feel the anticipation hanging thick in the air. Bread day is not casual, it's eventful. You might joke it's the medieval version of meal prep Sunday, except instead of Tupperware, you've got lumps of sticky dough and a chance of losing your spot in line. The baking begins with arguments. Who arrived first? Whose turn is it? Who gets the hotter part of the oven? You overhear bickering sharp enough to slice flour dust. My dough needs the center heat. Your dough looks flat as a pancake, cousin. Bread day is democratic in theory, but chaotic in practice. Like a medieval version of saving seats with jackets. Historians still argue whether ovens were strictly communal or if wealthier households sometimes had private ones. Some records suggest wealthier peasants or manors kept smaller ovens, while others insist the shared oven was the norm. What's certain is that the oven itself was a social magnet. You didn't just bake, you gossiped, negotiated, swapped news, maybe even flirted while waiting your turn. Your dough sits heavy in a clay bowl. Flour, water, salt if you could spare it, and maybe a dollop of sourdough starter passed down like a family heirloom. Yeast packets are centuries away. Fermentation here is alive, bubbling, unpredictable. Sometimes the dough rises beautifully. Sometimes it sulks into a dense brick. You peer at your own lump, whisper a prayer, and cross your fingers. A mainstream fact: bread came in layers of privilege. White bread, called manchet, was fine, sifted, and soft, reserved for the wealthy. Darker rye or barley loaves fed the poor. Most peasants gnawed on brown bread, dense and heavy, often stretched with whatever filler was available. Acorns, chestnuts, pea flour fit, could be ground. It might sneak into your loaf. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some places, loaves were stamped with family marks before sliding into the oven. That way, when dozens baked together, no one could claim your bread. It's the medieval version of writing your name on a lunchbox, except this lunchbox might be your entire week's calories. The oven roars as firewood is shoved inside, flames licking the stone walls. You feel the heat slap your face even from several steps back. Once the oven is blazing, the fire is raked out, leaving the stone chamber hot enough to bake for hours. One by one, loaves are slid inside with long wooden paddles. The smell that follows, pure magic. Smoky, nutty, earthy comfort wrapped in scent. For a moment, hunger pauses, and everyone leans in, breathing deeply. Bread day is also comedy day. Someone mutters about last week's disaster when a loaf came out black as coal. Another brags that their starter is so lively it nearly climbed out of the bowl last night. You chuckle, picturing dough sneaking off to start a new life somewhere less demanding. 3 jokes per 1,000 words, remember? Here's one. Medieval bread might be dense enough to stop arrows, but hey, it doubles as a shield at least once. As loaves bake, you wait. The queue moves slowly, villagers shifting baskets, swatting children, trading small favors. Someone hands you a piece of dried apple as thanks for saving their spot. You chew it, leathery but sweet, and remind yourself that fruit, when dried, can last through the winter. Survival is always about planning. Historians still debate just how nutritious peasant bread was. Some argue it provided steady energy, enough to sustain hard labor. Others point to frequent deficiencies, arguing that bread alone was far from balanced. What's undeniable is that bread dominated the diet. Sometimes up to half of daily calories came from it. No bread, no life. When your turn finally comes, your dough slides onto the hot stone. You glance inside, watching other loaves browning, crusts cracking like miniature earthquakes. The oven's heat hums against your skin, sweat gathering on your forehead. You retreat, crossing your arms, waiting like a parent at a school recital. Will your bread succeed, or will it shame you in front of half the village? Minutes crawl. The chatter grows louder, but your eyes never leave that oven mouth. At last, your loaf is pulled out, crust browned, smelling faintly of smoke. You tap it with your knuckle, listening for the hollow drum that means done. It's heavy, but it's bread. Your bread. For a brief, glowing moment, you feel like a medieval celebrity before someone bumps you aside to claim their own. The loaf cools in your hands, warmth radiating through the crust. You resist tearing into it immediately. Bread isn't just for you, it's shared, stretched, rationed carefully across meals. It might float in stews, soak up broth, or be dunked into milk. Every crumb matters, so you swallow your impatience. One more quirky detail for flavor. Stale bread was rarely wasted. It could be softened in liquid, crumbled into soups, even used as trenchers, flat slabs of old bread, serving as edible plates. After soaking in stew, the trencher itself became part of the meal. Talk about eco-friendly dining, no washing up, just chewing your dish. By evening, villagers carry loaves home like trophies. The oven grows quiet, its belly cooling, the day's drama fading. Smoke drifts lazily above rooftops, the scent of fresh bread mingling with manure, wood, and damp earth. You clutch your loaf, proud, exhausted, and oddly comforted. Bread day has taught you something. Food in a medieval village isn't just about filling your stomach. It's about community, shared spaces, gossip and laughter, waiting your turn, and walking home with the literal fruits of collective effort. Your loaf is proof that survival is never solitary. It's baked together in heat and in patience. The bread from yesterday still sits heavy in your satchel, its crust hardened overnight. You gnaw on a corner as you wander through the village, teeth straining against the chew. Bread alone fills your stomach, but soon enough, you crave something richer protein, the thing that makes muscles rebuild after all that endless grinding, hauling, and hoeing. Trouble is, in a medieval village, meat is scarce, fish is salty, and the church keeps reminding you that pleasure is suspicious, especially when it's edible. You pass the butcher's hut, though butcher here is more of a seasonal role. Animals aren't slaughtered. Daily keeping them alive is more useful than killing them. Cows give milk, sheep give wool, chickens give eggs. Only when winter bites hard or a feast demands extravagance do villagers bring out the knives. So when meat does appear, it's an event. The smell alone can send your imagination galloping. Historians still argue whether peasants really had meat once a week or if it was closer to once in a blue moon. Some accounts suggest pork scraps and small birds found their way into diets, while others insist the poor survived on plants and grains with barely a hint of meat across the year. What's certain is that when meat appeared, it was treasured boiled into stews, roasted over flames, or salted for preservation. Today, you're more likely to find salted herring. Barrels of the stuff line the market, stinking enough to make your nose wrinkle. Fish was the protein of choice, not because it was glamorous, but because it was practical. Rivers and coasts provided, and salting stretched fish through long winters. The church also played its part. Fasting days off and half the calendar banned meat, but allowed fish. So salted herring became the medieval equivalent of instant noodles. Cheap, reliable, and a little soul-crushing after the 20th bowl. A mainstream fact. The church calendar dictated diets. Over 100 fasting days meant meatless meals were common, and fish filled the gap. Wealthier households might indulge in fresh salmon or pike, while you gnawed salted cod so tough it doubled as a medieval chew toy. Here as a quirky tidbit to brighten your salted supper. Some villages trained cats to guard barrels of fish from thieving rats. Imagine the medieval version of home security, purring, scratching, occasionally napping on the job. Cats didn't just chase vermin. They became part of the food economy. Tiny fur-clad employees paid in scraps. You watch as women gut small fish by the stream, their hands quick and practiced. Scales flash in the sunlight, guts spill into buckets, and the smell hits like a slap. The river itself is alive with chatter and laughter. Work here doubles as social time. Someone jokes about last year's herring being so salty it could pickle your insides, and everyone groans knowingly. You laugh too, because humor is survival when your dinner fights back with brine. Meat, when it comes, carries status. A feast might include roasted pork, venison if the Lord felt generous, or on rare occasions game like rabbit or pheasant. But these luxuries were often forbidden to peasants by law. Hunting deer in the Lord's forest could mean fines, mutilation, or worse. Yet hunger makes rule-breaking tempting. Historians still debate how much poaching occurred, but bones found in village middens suggest that yes, peasants sometimes risked it. A rabbit snared in the woods, a pigeon shot with a sling. Teeny rebellions against hunger and authority. You chew another mouthful of your bread and imagine it paired with pork fat sizzling in a pan, or a stew rich with beef bones. The fantasy is strong enough to make your stomach growl. But reality strikes. Tonight's dinner is more likely a thin broth, flavored faintly with salted fish, bulked out with turnips, and thickened by breadcrumbs. Filling? Yes. Thrilling? No. One light joke sneaks in as you stir the pot in your mind. If a medieval cooking show existed, it would be one long apology. Welcome back to Peasant Kitchen. Today, we're making surprise pottage with salted herring. Again, stay tuned next week when we make pottage with salted herring. Still, there are bright spots. Chickens cluck nearby, offering occasional eggs. A goat might be milked, and once in a while, a pig is slaughtered. It's every scrap used. Nothing goes to waste. Intestines become sausage casings. Fat becomes lard, bones, flavor, broth. Even blood is saved for black pudding. If the thought makes you queasy, remember, medieval villagers had no room for pickiness. Waste meant hunger. At feast days, you might witness extravagance. Whole pigs roasted on spits. Steaming platters of meat carried into the Lord's hall. The scent wafts toward the village, a reminder that while you choose salted fish, others dine in luxury. It's a hierarchy reinforced not just by land or money, but by what fills your stomach. Historians still argue whether villagers resented this imbalance deeply or accepted it as part of life. Maybe both. Hunger is a powerful equalizer, but envy lingers when the smell of roasting venison drifts across your empty bowl. By late afternoon, barrels are sealed, fires doused, and fish salted and stacked for storage. You rub your hands on your tunic, the stink of herring stubborn. It will cling for days, a reminder of where your protein comes from. You might joke that medieval perfume was equal parts wood smoke, sweat, and fish brine. Attractive, right? As the sun dips, you head home, arms full of whatever scraps you've bartered or earned. Dinner is modest, bread softened in broth, a sliver of salted fish, maybe an onion thrown in for sharpness. You slurp it slowly, grateful for warmth, if not variety. Your belly fills, your body relaxes, and your mind drifts to the rhythm of survival. Here's a final quirky superstition for tonight. Some believed eating hare could make you timid, while eating rooster might give you courage. Food wasn't just fuel, it carried imagined powers shaping not only your body, but your spirit. Whether true or not, it added meaning to every bite. So you finish your meal, wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, and lean back by the fire. Tomorrow promises more gathering, more grinding, more scraping. But for now, you savor what little protein you've managed, even if it's salty enough to make you dream of rivers. Your eyes open to the muffled clang of iron on stone. The sound draws you like a bell because, in truth, it is one. The blacksmith is already at his forge, hammering sparks from glowing metal. But this isn't just about plowshares or horseshoes. It's about your food. Every meal you eat depends on tools, and every tool depends on the blacksmith's temper, both figurative and literal. You shuffle over bread crust in your hand to watch him work. His tunic is dark with soot, hair plastered with sweat. He grips iron tongs, pulling a glowing blade from the coals. The village blacksmith isn't glamorous, he's part magician, part mechanic. He shapes the very objects that let you survive. Without him, your kitchen would be a bare hearth with little more than sticks. Knives, axes, sickles, scythes are his signature dishes, though you won't find them in any cookbook. Farmers need scythes to harvest. Women need knives to chop. Hunters need arrowheads to aim at rabbits darting through hedges. Even your humble spoon might have passed under his hammer. And let's be honest, try eating pottage with your bare hands, and you'll quickly understand why a blacksmith is the unsung celebrity chef of medieval life. Mainstream fact: iron tools revolutionized farming efficiency during the Middle Ages. Wooden plows gave way to heavier iron plows, which could cut deeper into tough soil. This increased yields, and in turn, kept more villagers alive. It wasn't glamorous, but it was transformative. Here's your quirky tidbit for the forge. Blacksmiths often acted as dentists, removing rotten teeth with their tongs. Imagine you're here to sharpen a sickle, and the smith squints at your jaw, says open wide, and then yank. The same hands that shape your dinner knife are suddenly shaping your smile. Efficient, maybe. Comfortable? Absolutely not. You watch him hammer out a new blade. The rhythm hypnotic, like a heartbeat for the village. Sparks fly, smoke curls, and the smell of hot iron mingles with the acrid temps of sweat. Kids hover nearby, waiting for scraps of twisted metal that they can tie to leather cords as makeshift charms. Some villagers whisper that the smith holds secret knowledge, half craftsman, half sorcerer. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were genuinely feared for supposed magical powers, or if that's just folklore magnified by the glow of the forge. While the smith makes your knife, you think about your kitchen. A fire pit, a few clay pots, a wooden ladle, and if you're lucky, an iron cauldron. That cauldron is the heart of your cooking. Without it, no pottage, no boiling, no flavor at all. Owning one might mean pooling resources with neighbors or inheriting it like treasure. The smith keeps such cauldrons alive, patching holes, reforging broken rims. He doesn't just make, he repairs. You heft a newly sharpened sickle in your hands, imagining the sweep of it through wheat. Tools aren't neutral, they shape what you can eat. A dull scythe means wasted grain. A cracked cauldron means no stew. A broken spit means meat charred into inedible lumps. The blacksmith is the quiet architect of your diet. For humor's sake, you picture a medieval version of a cooking competition. Two villagers standing at smoky hearths, racing to make the best stew except. One's ladle breaks mid-stir. The crowd gasps. The blacksmith storms in, cape billowing, fixes it on the spot, and saves dinner. Move over, Gordon Ramsay. The real kitchen hero wields a hammer. But iron isn't everything. Wood plays its part too. Carpenters carve bowls, spoons, butter churns, and barrels. Without barrels, no salted herring. Without churns, no butter for your bread. You run your hand over the smooth curve of a wooden spoon, functional, humble, but essential. Lose it, and you're back to slurping pottage with your fingers, which is basically the medieval equivalent of eating soup straight out of the pot. The rhythm of tools in daily life is relentless. Grindstones were as women sharpen blades. Pottery wheels spin as clay transforms into cooking pots. Even baskets, woven tightly, carry grains, berries, and fish. Every object in your home bears the fingerprints of some craftsperson. You don't own much, but what you do own is alive with labor. Historians still argue whether peasants had enough tools or were always scraping by with broken, half-patched implements. Some records suggest villages collectively owned big-ticket items like plows and mills, while individuals scraped together personal gear. Either way, the line between survival and hunger was as thin as a knife escalatorily sharpened at the forge. The smith wipes his brow and sets down your knife, still warm from the anvil. You trade a sack of grain for his work barter, being as common as coin. That blade will slice onions, cut herbs, and maybe gut a fish if you're lucky. In a way, it's more valuable than the meal it helps prepare, because without the knife, there is no meal. Another quirky angle. Some villagers believed that eating food cooked in iron pots gave you strength, as if the metal seeped into your bones. It's not far off from modern science. Iron in your diet does matter. But back then, it was wrapped in superstition. You imagine biting into turnips from the iron cauldron and suddenly flexing like a medieval superhero. Spoiler, you don't. But the idea keeps spirits high. As the forge quiets, you head back to your hut. Tools clink against your belt, heavy but reassuring. You pass neighbors stirring pots with long spoons, chopping herbs with iron blades, and sharpening scythes for the fields. Every clang, scrape, and swish reminds you that dinner is a team effort, not just of cooks, but of smiths, carvers, potters, and weavers. You light your hearth, set your pot, and stir tonight's meal with your new knife at the ready. The fire pops, the iron pot hisses, and the wooden spoon dances in your hand. You realize, suddenly, that food isn't just about what you eat, it's about the invisible network of tools and hands that make eating possible. As the pot simmers, you lean back, listening to the distant echo of hammer against anvil. That sound is your guarantee that tomorrow you'll still have the means to eat, slice, chop, and stir. Without it, you're not just hungry, you're helpless. Smoke drifts lazily from your hearth as you stir the pot of pottage, its surface shimmering with small waves of heat. The stew smells of yesterday's salted fish, softened vegetables, and the faint sharpness of herbs drying overhead. You've grown accustomed to this. Aromize the scent of survival, of effort, and of ingenuity, even if it smells strange to modern noses. Today's task is preservation, and it begins with patience. You lean over the fire, letting the warmth seep into your shoulders. Knowing that without careful attention, the food you prepare will last only a few hours instead of days, weeks, or even months. Preservation is not optional. In a medieval village, each meal depends on yesterday's labor, and each day depends on yesterday's preservation. You glance at the bundle of herbs dangling from the rafters, thyme and sage curling in the smoke. You pinch a leaf from each, toss it into the pot, and watch the flavors mingle. Herbs are multifunctional. They season food, mask odors, and ward off imagined illnesses or spirits. Some villagers swear by rosemary to improve memory, sage to ward off evil, and thyme to imbue courage. You hum softly, more from habit than belief, letting superstition mingle with practicality, because here, the two are inseparable. Historians still debate whether these beliefs were widespread or merely anecdotal quirks, but in the moment, the gestures feel as essential as the ingredients themselves. You turn your attention to the salted fish resting in a wooden tub beside the hearth. Barrels of it line many village homes, packed tightly and layered with salt to draw out moisture. The scent is sharp and overwhelming to the untrained nose, but to you, it signals security. Without these preserved proteins, winter would be relentless. You select a small herring, run a thumb along its surface, and note that the flesh is firm and dry, the hallmark of proper curing. One misstep in salting, one bit of rain that sneaks in, and the fish could spoil. But you've learned the subtle cues, the way the skin glistens, the slight bend in the tail, the crisp sound when you press it. Mainstream fact: salting, smoking, and drying were the cornerstone of medieval preservation. Without these methods, villages risked famine, especially during long winters or poor harvests. Entire economies and trade networks depended on preserved foods traveling long distances to feed armies, towns, and households. Your village operates on the microcosm of this larger system, with each household carefully managing its own stock. You add a few chunks of dried root vegetables to the pot, tossing in onions and cabbage that have been stored in cool, straw-lined bins. These additions thicken the pottage, making it more filling, and the flavors meld together under slow, steady heat. You stir methodically, listening to the gentle hiss as steam rises. Imagining the rhythm as a kind of quiet music, a lullaby of survival. Preservation is not glamorous, but it has its own poetry. A quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed that stirring a pot clockwise would encourage the food to last longer, while counterclockwise stirring could spoil the meal or invite misfortune. You follow the clockwise rule, half in jest, half in habit, and smile at the thought that such simple gestures carry a weight of tradition. Next, you examine the bread left from yesterday. Its crust is firm, even tough, but the interior remains soft enough to crumble into the pot. Bread is a preservation miracle on its own. It stretches meals, thickens soups, and even acts as a vessel for other foods. You break chunks into the simmering pottage, letting them soak up liquid and release starch that subtly thickens the broth. No morsel is wasted, nothing is taken for granted. In this way, preservation is as much about technique as it is about respect for food itself. Cheese, another preserved delight, sits in a corner. Hard wheels are lined on wooden shelves, rinds darkened by age and exposure to smoke. You cut a thin slice, tasting the tang, and marvel at its endurance. Cheese is an edible investment, providing protein and flavor across days, weeks, or even months. Some families would carefully rotate their wheels, slicing small pieces to last longer, while others reserve their best rounds for feast days or trade. Water is another consideration in preservation. You dip a ladle into a nearby basin, cool and fresh from the well, and sprinkle a bit over herbs and roots as you stir. Moisture can be your friend or your enemy. Too little, and food dries and crumbles. Too much, and it spoils. Managing this delicate balance is a daily challenge, honed over years of observation and trial. Historians still debate how medieval villagers measured such subtleties without modern thermometers or hygrometers. But the results speak for themselves. Food that lasts long enough to survive harsh seasons. Smoke itself acts as a preservative. You glance at the slabs of meat and fish hanging near the rafters, darkened and aromatic. The gentle curl of smoke keeps pests at bay and flavors food subtly while drying it. You run a hand along the surface, noting the texture, the scent, the slight tackiness that indicates readiness. Smoking is labor-intensive, requiring careful attention to temperature and time, but the payoff is months of stored nourishment. As midday approaches, you consider the broader web of preservation. Every aspect of village life feeds into it. Tools forged by the blacksmith allow you to cut, chop, and scrape. The oven bakes bread that thickens soups. Water from the well hydrates grains and softens dried vegetables. Preservation is not solitariat, is woven into every interaction, every skill, every day. The success of your pottage relies on centuries of accumulated knowledge, not just your own labor. A humorous thought occurs. If modern chefs could see your slow cooker, a smoke-filled pot of salted fish and bread, they might faint or post a horror video online. But here, it's genius. It's survival, innovation, and creativity rolled into one. Even rituals, quirks, and superstitions, singing to the pot, sprinkling pepper for luck enhance, not just flavor, but morale. By late afternoon, the pottage is thick, flavorful, and safe to store for the evening. You ladle a portion into a bowl for yourself, knowing the rest will cool gradually and feed your family or neighbors. Preservation, after all, is as much about planning for others as it is for yourself. The careful combination of smoke, salt, dried roots, bread, cheese, and herbs ensures that the village can endure scarcity with dignity. You lean back, tasting the stew. Its flavors are modest but comforting, smoky, salty, herby, and earthy. Each bite carries the weight of labor, the wisdom of tradition, and the subtle magic of superstition. You breathe in the smoke, listen to the crackle of the fire, and feel a quiet satisfaction. Preservation is never glamorous, never effortless, but it is essential, and mastery of it transforms mere survival into something resembling security and comfort. Tonight, as the village settles under the hush of early evening, you sit with your bowl and consider the delicate balance of your work. Grain, meat, herbs, bread, water, and smoke, all intertwined, all critical. Preservation is the silent backbone of life here, unseen by outsiders, but indispensable. And in this moment, the act of maintaining food, sustaining life, and honoring tradition feels like its own reward, rich as any feast. The morning sun barely brushes the horizon as you stumble toward the storage shed, the village still wrapped in mist. Today isn't about planting, harvesting, or grinding. It's about flavor, preservation, and the rare luxury of spices. You're here to inspect the tiny sacks, jars, and pouches that carry the aromas of distant lands. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, words that sound exotic and magical because they practically are. Spices are the ultimate medieval status symbol, more valuable than silver in some regions, and even a pinch can turn a humble stew into something vaguely celebratory. Historians still argue whether spices were common in peasant diets or mostly limited to wealthier households. Some accounts suggest that only the Lord's table tasted of peppered meats or sugared pastries, while others indicate that small quantities trickled down via merchants and fairs. Regardless, the idea of seasoning your pottage to perfection is both thrilling and mostly imaginary for most villagers. You carefully unwrap a small sack of black pepper, releasing a pungent aroma that immediately makes you sneeze. One pinch will stretch over several pots, but even that feels extravagant. In a pinch, villagers rely on homegrown herbs, thyme, parsley, rosemary, and the occasional wild garlic bulb. Herbs are the backbone of flavor. They lend a subtle sweetness or bitterness, masking monotony, and, according to superstition, protecting against illness. Some believe rosemary strengthens memory, thyme aids courage, and sage wards off witches. You snort at the thought, yet tie a sprig above the hearth, anyway just in case. A quirky tidbit. In some regions, spice merchants were believed to carry hidden charms or even curses along with their goods. Buy cinnamon, and you might also receive a small fortune cookie of superstition. Some villagers swore their pepper had wanderlust, capable of bringing luck or ill fortune, depending on how it was sprinkled. Your job today is simple yet vital. Inspect food, treat it, and ensure it lasts. Smoke-filled rooms and herb bundles aren't enough. You must also rotate the stock, discard any that smells off, and decide which items are preserved and which will be cooked immediately. Preservation is a skill passed from parent to child, honed over generations, and it's an art as much as a science. The wrong move could mean moldy bread, rancid lard, or worse. Salt again proves indispensable. You rub a handful over fish or meat, drawing out moisture while imparting flavor. Salted fish may smell overwhelming at first, but the taste becomes an acquired skill, briny, chewy, and utterly necessary. Barrels are stacked with care, some even weighted down to keep rats from sneaking in. Smoke curls around the room, softening the scent, but never erasing it. You pause to admire a slab of cured pork hanging from a beam. Its edges darkened from smoke. It's ready to last months, sliced thin for daily meals or for special occasions. Preservation isn't glamorous, but it is life itself. Every morsel that survives the season strengthens the village's chance to endure winter's cruelty. Mainstream fact: before refrigeration, smoking, salting, drying, and pickling were critical survival strategies. Villagers mastered them out of necessity, creating diets that balanced flavor with longevity. Your pottage, salted fish, and dried herbs are all products of this delicate balance. A little humor sneaks in. Imagine trying to explain this to someone in 2025. Oh yes, we love our sustainable, artisanal smoked herring. It's naturally fermented with overtones of smoke and sweat. Social media would explode with disgust. And yet here, it's culinary genius. You set to work trimming mold from a wheel of cheese, careful not to waste the edible portions underneath. Cheese is another marvel of preservation, a protein-dense food that endures months if kept in cool, dry corners. You cut a piece and taste its tangy richness, imagining that one day, travelers might write poems about such flavors, even if you never will. Next, you check the herbs. Sage leaves are brittle but potent. Thyme curls delicately. Rosemary is surprisingly resilient, retaining fragrance despite days in smoke-filled storage. You crush a few sprigs, releasing a cloud of aroma that momentarily transports you from mud and toil to something like culinary aspiration. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly understood fermentation science or relied solely on trial, error, and tradition. Modern microbiology would explain mold, yeast, and bacteria, but for villagers, success was measured by survival, not chemical knowledge. You shake your head at their humility. You might never invent penicillin, but at least you know which herbs pair with salted herring. By midday, the preservation chamber hums with life. Barrels of fish, baskets of roots, sacks of grain, and hanging herbs. You move methodically, ensuring the fragile balance is maintained. This is labor that rarely gets celebrated, but it is the backbone of survival. Your hands smell faintly of salt and smoke, and the air is thick with scents that will linger in your memory long after you leave. A final quirky tidbit. Some peasants believe that sprinkling pepper over dried meat or fish could prevent it from wandering off or spoiling. You don't ask how, you just sprinkle. Ritual, superstition, and practicality intertwined so tightly that separating them seems impossible. As evening approaches, you light a small fire beneath your pot. Pottage simmers once again. this time perfumed by a scattering of dried herbs and a pinch of pepper that feels like a small rebellion against monotony. The flavors mingle slowly, comforting in their constancy, a promise that tonight at least the village will eat well. By the time you sit to eat, the room smells of smoke, herbs, and survival. Preservation isn't about indulgence, it's about continuity. Ensuring the village endures despite scarcity, harsh weather, and fickle harvests. Every bite carries this knowledge, centuries of wisdom embedded in leaves, salt, and careful attention. You chew slowly, savoring not just the flavors, but the centuries of technique behind them. Tomorrow, you'll return to the fields, grind the next batch of grain, light the next fire, and continue the dance of survival. But tonight, thanks to smoke, salt, and a tiny pinch of pepper, you can feel a sense of triumph over the relentless demands of medieval life. Dawn breaks with a pale glow of misty light spilling across the village. Today, you are tasked with a chore that is deceptively simple: water. Not just drinking water, but ensuring everything from the fields to the livestock to the cooking pots has access to clean ore as clean as the village can manage. Water, saw. Toward the well, arms aching from previous labor, the chill of morning biting at your hands. A bucket and rope are your only companions, yet what it carries is essential. Without water, crops fail, bread dough won't rise, and life itself falters. You peer into the dark mouth of the well, the rope clinking against stone as it descends. Water reflects faint light, winking up at you like it knows its own value. You draw it up slowly, feel the tension in your arms, and glimpse the future in every splash. Historians still argue whether wells were consistently clean or if contamination was a major cause of disease. Some evidence suggests villagers had rudimentary filtration methods, while others simply accepted risk as part of daily life. Either way, access to water shapes everything from survival to hygiene. A mainstream fact: medieval wells were often lined with stone and capped with a pulley system, allowing communities to draw water efficiently. Those with a well on their land had a significant advantage. Others relied on rivers, streams, or rain collection, which came with risks of contamination and conflict over usage. Today, you are one of the fortunate few. You haul bucket after bucket, splashing water into basins, filling cauldrons for cooking, and wetting rags for cleaning. Each pour carries a sense of ritual, a recognition that this liquid is life itself. Livestock gets its share, goats bleating impatiently, chickens pecking at puddles, and the occasional pig nudging for attention. Managing water is more than chore, it's choreography, balancing need and supply with skill learned over seasons. A quirky tidbit: some villages believed that water drawn at dawn had healing properties. Whether used for bathing, cooking, or sprinkling over the fields, it was thought to carry vigor and protection against evil spirits. You smirk, but pour carefully anyway, ritual or not. Fresh water is vital. The sun rises higher, warming the mist into soft humidity. You trudge through the fields, wetting soil around early sprouts, ensuring they drink before the heat steals moisture. The scent of damp earth mingles with smoke from the cooking fires, creating a perfume uniquely medieval. You pause to admire the small shoots of wheat peeking from tilled earth without water. These promising greens would shrivel before your eyes. Historians still debate how effective medieval irrigation techniques truly were. Some suggest that fields relied almost entirely on rainfall, leaving villages at the mercy of weather. Others point to simple canals, ditches, and water-lifting devices that extended harvest success. You, however, see both skill mixed with chance, labor mixed with luck. By midday, your arms are sore, your tunic damp, and the bucket seemingly heavier than ever. Villagers move about, filling their own vessels, swapping tips about well maintenance, trading small favors for a turn at the rope, or sharing gossip while fetching water. Community thrives around this necessity, not just in shared toil, but in shared dependency. Water is the great equalizer. Rich or poor, young or old, no one escapes its demand. You pause by a trough, splashing water for the goats. One nibbles a sleeve, another tugs at a braid. You laugh, despite the ache, because these small irritations are woven into daily life. Without them, the day would feel impossibly long, even if the labor itself remains constant. Preservation of water is another concern. Rain barrels, covered cisterns, and occasionally small clay filters help protect against spoilage. Unlike modern pipes, medieval water doesn't travel far from source to pot. Every gallon is precious, every drop a matter of planning. You tilt your head, imagining what life would be like without this care. Droughts turning fields into dust, flour failing to rise, pottage thickening into paste. Quirky tidbit alert. In some regions, villagers would toss coins into the well for luck, or to appease water spirits. You consider tossing a pebble instead. Superstition or not, the action feels satisfying. Every ritual, no matter how strange, reinforces the connection between human effort and nature's generosity. By evening, the village's water needs have been met. The fields damp, livestock quenched, and cauldrons filled. You slump against a fence post, dripping wet, mud streaking your arms, and realize the chore is as constant as breath itself. No meal is complete without water. No harvest prospers without it. The day's labor ensures tomorrow's survival. You return to the hearth, weary but satisfied, and begin preparing the evening meal. The bread is still firm but edible, vegetables softened in simmering water, salted fish ready to be dunked for flavor. Steam rises, mixing with the smoke of the fire, the aroma of herbs, and the faint tang of iron tools from yesterday's work. Eating feels like a reward, earned not just by hunger, but by the sweat and planning invested in every ingredient. A mainstream fact to ponder. Medieval kitchens were hubs of activity, but the water supply determined efficiency. The closer a household to a well or stream, the easier it was to cook, clean, and maintain hygiene. Distance could mean hours of labor just for a single pot of soup. Every drop mattered. By nightfall, the village is quiet except for the occasional bleat or cluck. You sip pottage, think about tomorrow's grind, and reflect on the invisible threads connecting water, labor, tools, and food. Every element, well, forge, oven, herb, salt intertwines to sustain life. Without one, the delicate balance falters. One last quirky detail. Some villages believed that spilling water during meal preparation could summon bad luck or even illness. You spill a tiny drop and mutter an apology, half in jest, half in superstition, because why tempt fate when dinner is on the line? With the hearth glowing and the pot emptying, you lean back, savoring the rhythm of medieval life. It's repetitive, exhausting, and often monotonous, but there's a quiet satisfaction in the mastery of daily necessities. Survival is as much about skill and community as it is about luck, and tonight, as water replenishes life across the village, you feel the quiet triumph of another day navigated successfully. Night falls with a slow, comforting certainty, wrapping the village in deep shadows and soft, silvered moonlight. You sit by the hearth, the fire glowing low, its warmth spilling across the stone floor and illuminating the rough timber walls. In front of you, the pot of pottage simmers gently, releasing fragrant wisps of smoke that mingle with the earthy aroma of yesterday's salted fish and today's carefully preserved vegetables. This simple meal embodies countless hours of labor, countless decisions about preservation, and countless small acts of ingenuity. Each ingredient, each stir, each pinch of salt is a reminder that in this medieval village, food is far more than sustenance. It is survival, skill, and subtle artistry. You take a deep breath and consider the day. Morning was spent hauling water from the well, ensuring that every plant, animal, and pot had its share. The midday hours were devoted to inspecting preserved foods, checking for spoilage, and arranging barrels of salted fish, drying herbs and cheese wheels in their cool, dim corners. Afternoon brought chopping, stirring, and monitoring the pottage, making sure it simmered slowly and didn't scorch. And now, evening finds you here, savoring the culmination of all that labor. Mainstream fact: medieval villagers depended heavily on routine and timing to sustain their food supply. Without careful rotation, attention to preservation, and constant vigilance, even a small mistake, moldy bread, spoiled fish, or overcooked vegetables could cascade into hunger. The reliability of the food chain was directly tied to skill, observation, and patience. You scoop a spoonful of pottage, the steam rising in delicate spirals, and taste the mingling of flavors. There's salt, of course, and the subtle tang of dried herbs softened by hours of cooking. Tiny flecks of bread have thickened the broth, giving it a satisfying body. The taste is simple, but to you, it is profound, an encapsulation of labor, tradition, and ingenuity. This is not haute cuisine, yet it embodies centuries of accumulated knowledge about survival, taste, and nutrition. Historians still debate how much variety existed in peasant diets. Some argue that most meals were repetitive, monotonous, and unimaginative, while others suggest that careful use of herbs, occasional spices, and creative preservation techniques allowed for subtle variations in flavor that kept food both palatable and sustainable. You know, as you stir and taste, that there is a truth in both perspectives. Survival demands consistency, yet ingenuity allows even the humblest ingredients to shine. A quirky tidbit: some villagers believed that talking to your food, or even singing softly while stirring, improved its flavor or longevity. You hum a little tune, partly amused, partly respectful of tradition, and convince yourself the pottage tastes a fraction better because of it. Maybe superstition is just another form of seasoning, adding confidence and comfort to the meal. Your mind drifts to the broader network of labor that makes this food possible. The blacksmith's hammer shaping knives and cauldrons. The carpenter's hands carving spoons and boards. The miller's steady grind transforming grain into flour. The shepherds and farmers tending animals and crops. Preservation, cooking, and consumption are the visible tip of an iceberg composed of countless invisible acts. Without any one of them, this bowl of pottage would be impossible. You consider how this web extends beyond the village itself. Trade routes deliver salt and the occasional luxury spice, while local knowledge ensures herbs and roots are cultivated and stored for longevity. Even superstition and ritual, pepper for luck, herbs for courage, smoke for protection, become part of this ecosystem, blending practicality and belief into a cohesive system of survival. Quirky tidbit number 2. In some regions, villagers believed that the first slice of bread broken from a new loaf should be offered to household spirits, or else the rest of the loaf might spoil prematurely. You smile faintly, remembering how your grandmother once tapped the first slice on the floor and whispered a quick apology. A gesture that made perfect sense in a world where every crumb mattered. As the pot empties and the embers glow softer, you reflect on the rhythm of daily life. Each day is a cycle of preparation, preservation, and consumption, with subtle variations dictated by season, weather, and resources. The monotony might seem oppressive to an outsider, yet within it exists a kind of beauty, a sense of mastery over the elements, a quiet triumph in sustaining life against odds that are often unforgiving. Preservation extends beyond food. It encompasses knowledge, tradition, and skill passed down through generations. You realize that in every preserved fish, every dried herb, every salted slab of meat, lives a story of past harvests, of winters survived, of ingenuity adapted to scarcity. Even mistakes, spoiled bread, oversalted fish, burned pottage teach lessons, refining technique and understanding for future survival. A humorous thought drifts through your mind. A modern chef visiting this kitchen would likely faint or record the horrors of slow-cooked fish and recycled bread for an online audience. Yet here, this is genius, the pinnacle of practicality. Smoke, salt, fire, water, and skill combine to create meals that last and sustain. Tradition and superstition, quirky as they may seem, act as extra layers of preservation rituals that reinforce the careful attentiveness required to survive. You take a final sip of pottage, feeling the warmth spread through your body. The fire crackles, embers falling like tiny sparks of memory and effort. Shadows dance along the walls, flickering in time with the slow exhalation of breath. You consider the villagers asleep under thatched roofs, each household performing its own quiet rituals of preservation, each reliant on skill, community, and chance. The village functions as a single organism, each action interdependent, each meal a victory of collective endurance. As you lean back, muscles aching and hands still faintly scented with salt herbs and smoke, you recognize the profound truth of this life. Survival is more than finding food, is understanding it, respecting it, and sustaining it with care. Every act, from the quern to the hearth, from the well to the blacksmith's anvil, contributes to the continuity of life. Each day is an exercise in balance, patience, and observation. And tonight, that balance holds. Your eyes grow heavy, and the rhythm of the fire, the soft hum of smoke, and the quiet weight of accomplishment lull you into reflection. Even as exhaustion seeps in, there is a sense of satisfaction that goes beyond physical needs. Satisfaction born of knowledge, of work done well, and of the subtle triumphs of life sustained in a harsh, demanding world. With the last of the pottage gone, you extinguish the small hearth flames, leaving only embers to glow in the darkness. Shadows stretch and settle. The village sleeps, the animals rest, and the tools cauldrons and barrels stand quietly, ready for tomorrow's labor. The work continues, but for now, there is pause. You lean back, letting the warmth of the fire and the gentle rhythm of the night cradle you. In the stillness, you sense the continuity of generations, the invisible hands of past villagers guiding, teaching, preserving. Tonight, food is more than nourishment. It is a vessel for survival, memory, and connection. It is the embodiment of skill, care, and tradition. And through it, the village persists. And as your eyes close, heavy with sleep, you feel the quiet triumph of life maintained, of meals earned, and of the delicate, enduring balance that sustains every moment in this medieval world. The night stretches long and gentle. You sit back by the hearth, the embers glowing softly, painting the walls in muted oranges and deep shadows. The world outside has quieted. Fields are still, the livestock tucked in their pens, and the village rests under a blanket of stars. For a moment, the relentless pace of daily labor pauses, leaving only the warmth of the fire and the lingering aroma of herbs, smoke, and bread. You breathe slowly, feeling the ebb of exhaustion melt into calm. Your hands still smell faintly of salt, flour, an iron signature of a life lived in constant rhythm with the necessities of survival. Even the simplest meal carries the echoes of effort. The grain ground at dawn, the fish salted and smoked, the herbs gathered and dried, and the bread baked over the communal flames. You realize that every bite you take is a testament not just to your own labor, but to the village itself, a network of skill, knowledge, and care that stretches across generations. Outside, the wind rustles through the trees, soft and steady. You can almost hear the whispers of those who tended these fields centuries ago, guiding hands in every turn of the corn, every sweep of the scythe, every careful stir of a bubbling pot. The past feels present, alive in the simple, steady acts of cooking, preserving, and sharing food. Even the quirks and superstitions pepper for luck, singing over pots. Herbs for courage form a bridge between survival and meaning, blending practicality with a touch of magic. Your eyes drift to the shadows dancing across the floor. The fire hums its soft lullaby. The hard work, the smoke, the sweat, the small triumphs of each day, they coalesce into a rhythm, a pulse that underlies life in a medieval village. Even hunger, scarcity, and risk are softened here, framed by care, community, and the gentle triumph of routine. You feel a rare comfort, knowing that through these rituals, people endured, survived, and even found moments of joy. The day fades fully into night. You sip the last remnants of your pottage, savoring warmth and flavor, letting it linger. The world narrows to the flicker of the hearth, the murmur of distant streams, and the hush of sleeping animals. All is well for now. Survival is not only about food, it is about connection, rhythm, and the delicate orchestration of countless small tasks that, when done together, create life itself. Slowly, you allow your body to sink into the soft rhythm of rest. Your mind drifts on the smells, tastes, and textures of the day, recalling the bread's crust, the sharpness of salted fish, the earthy temps of herbs. Each memory softens, stretches, and fades like the embers of the fire, leaving behind a sense of completeness and quiet satisfaction. Tonight, the village sleeps, the hearth glows, and you breathe out the labor of centuries. The cycle will resume tomorrow, but for now, there is only calm, only warmth, only the gentle hum of life held steady by routine, care, and the enduring comfort of a simple meal.